What's the best bard in D&D? Well, it's tier list time. And if you stick around till the end of this build, I will go ahead and throw in a tiny little Easter egg, but just make sure not to spoil it for anybody in the comments. Bards in general have some pretty good base abilities between their jack of all trades, allowing them to add half their proficiency bonus to any skills that they don't have proficiency in. They get some instances of magical secrets, allowing them to dive into other classes' spell lists. And on top of that, their main stat is charisma, which is generally pretty powerful in role-playing scenarios because being able to persuade or deceive characters is just generally kind of powerful. And don't forget, you also get bardic inspiration, allowing you to inspire your allies, which is a pretty core feature of being a bard. But what about those subclasses? Well, let's dive in. And I should note that any abilities you get at a lower level are going to be weighted as far as their importance, because you're going to have those much longer in your campaign. And not every campaign makes it to a particularly high level. So let's start off with the Glamour Bard. This bard is actually very specifically useful. So because of that limitation, it's gonna get a bit of a hit, because this bard is specifically good for parties that like to avoid danger altogether. Its first feature, Mantle of Inspiration, grants some temp HP to a number of creatures equal to your charisma modifier, and allows everybody to use their reaction to run without provoking an opportunity attack. Literally, it's just, hey, let's get out of here. It has enthralling performance, so you can spend some time doing a performance check, but you have to do so for an entire minute, meaning you're not doing this in combat, and it allows you to charm a bunch of creatures in the process. And the mid-tier feature at level 6 is Mantle of Majesty. It allows you to cast command, which was basically like, hey, stop right there, or fall to the ground, or drop your weapon. And you can recast this over and over again as a bonus action, which is super powerful. And you don't even have to expend a spell slot when you're recasting this repeatedly. The last feature you get from this subclass is Unbreakable Majesty, allowing you to take on some sort of majestic form. And it's so impressive and awe-inspiring that any creature that tries to attack you, they have to make a saving throw. If they fail on a charisma save, they can no longer attack you for that turn. They have to attack somebody else or just completely fail at attacking altogether. And even if they succeed on that saving throw, they then have disadvantage on any saving throw against you in the next turn. You can only use this feature once per short or long rest, but it lasts for a minute. And if that creature has disadvantage on their next save, that means that you're very unlikely to get hit. Overall, the majority of these features are all about just getting away from danger. I was going to give this a D on the tier list because it's so specific around running away, but that Mantle of Majesty ability does boost it into a low C, just because being able to repeatedly cast command in any combat scenario is pretty powerful. But the limitation to basically be focused on running away in any dangerous situation does kind of suck. Next up, we have the College of Creation. And I would use a mouse-inspired reference here for bringing a bunch of inanimate objects to life, but I don't want to get this copyright strike. The first feature of this subclass is Moat of Potential. So if you give somebody some bardic inspiration, then they have this little floating moat around them, which can take on a look of like a music note or something that you want as far as role-playing, and it just circles around them until they use that inspiration. And depending on what they use their inspiration for, that moat has a different ability. So if you use your inspiration to help you on an ability check, you instead get to roll 2 uses of the bardic inspiration and see which one is better. If a creature uses it on an attack roll, when they hit with that attack, it does some thunder damage to not just that creature, but any creatures you choose within 5 feet of it, but only if they fail on a Constitution saving throw, and Constitution tends to be pretty high up there, especially as you get higher in levels. Finally, if somebody uses their inspiration on a saving throw, then they can actually get some temp HP at the same time, which does pair pretty well with having to roll a saving throw. The other feature you get when you take the subclass is Performance of Creation. So you can create a small or medium object that is non-magical, but it kind of like has this shimmer to it, and if you listen really close to it, it plays a little bit of music. And you might think this feature is kind of useless, but being able to create a non-magical object of any kind can be pretty helpful. If you get creative with this, you can use it to try and con a market goer and say, hey, I have this really fancy object. If you listen closely, it plays some music. Granted, that object actually only lasts for an hour, but whoever you're trying to sell it to might not know that, especially with a couple good charisma checks. The size of that object does upgrade to large at 6th level and up to huge at 14th level. But another use of this, if you're not trying to con the local townsfolk out of their hard-earned gold, is for the 6th level feature, animating performance. So you can use your music to animate an inanimate object. It lives for 1 hour, which coincidentally is the same amount of time as you can create an object for. It has to be a large or smaller object, it counts as a construct, and it has some pretty decent stats, and it can help you in battle. Its hit points scale with your level in Bard being 10 plus 5 times your Bard level. Its proficiency bonus aligns with yours. It only attacks if you order it to as your bonus action, but that's a pretty good use of your bonus action if you're not going to use it to inspire one of your allies. And it also helps your allies by being just near them, because it can increase or decrease the speed of any creatures within 10 feet of it. So it can boost up your ally speed by 10 feet, or it can decrease your enemy's speed by 10 feet. And overall, those are some great features, and none of them waste any use of your bardic inspiration, they only enhance it. And if you need to create more objects or create another animated object, you can actually just use a spell slot to do so instead of wasting more inspiration to recreate them. Overall, this makes it so you have a good amount of resources at your disposal. The only place this subclass really falls short is its final feature called Creative Crescendo. It's a 14th level feature that just allows you to create 2 objects instead of just 1. Granted, you can create an object that is huge at this point. So if you want to create a statue that is just kind of at an angle, it's gonna be very risky and allowed to fall on your enemies. Or you can also create a huge object that is basically just a house for you and your allies to live in, which is great in this housing market. The only other benefit is that there's no more gold limitation on the object you create, because originally there's a maximum as far as the gold value of being 20 times your Bard level, but now you can basically create an infinitely expensive item if you need it, which is a nice perk and does allow you to create a house if you want. But overall, I feel like it's a little bit of a soft landing for this subclass. If it wasn't for that, I would probably rate this S tier, but because it falls short a little bit there, I gotta knock it down to A. Overall, it's a great subclass. It has some cool possibilities, especially if you get creative with it. And actually, if you use that creative crescendo to create a large structure, especially in battle, you can then block off your enemies and still use the tiny object as your construct, helping you out. Next up, we got the Eloquence Bard, and this is one of the most stereotypical bards you can be. I mean, it is the ideal if you want to be that bard that just tries to seduce every possible encounter, or especially every possible enemy. And believe me, I've been in one of those parties where one of the players suddenly manages to seduce a dragon. And it kicks it off really well with the first feature, Silver Tongue, making it so you can not only not crit fail a persuasion or deception check, but actually you can't roll less than a 10, which is a pretty high level feature of being a rogue, but the rogue one applies to any skill that you have proficiency in. But if you know that you're going this route earlier in the build, you are able to take expertise in this, which means you can't roll less than a 10 and you get double your proficiency bonus in those 2 skills. So overall, what is most likely going to be the face of the party just becomes a heck of a lot better with Silver Tongue. The other feature you get at 3rd level is Unsettling Words, allowing you to use your bardic inspiration to negatively impact your enemies, forcing them to subtract the bardic inspiration die from their next saving throw. Speaking of bardic inspiration, at 6th level you get unfailing inspiration. So if you use your inspiration on an ally and they try to use that inspiration on an ability check, a saving throw, or an attack roll, and that particular use still fails, they don't lose the use of their bardic inspiration, meaning that your bardic inspiration die go a lot further because they're only useful if they succeed, which really means that those inspiration die are never going to waste. Also at 6th level, you get universal speech. So if you are trying to be that really seductive bard, now you can seduce basically any type of creature because they're gonna understand you. You can make a number of creatures equal to your charisma modifier understand whatever you're saying. The only downside is that you might not be able to understand them, so you're going to have to be pretty good at your insight checks. Then the 14th level feature is Infectious Inspiration. So if a creature uses their inspiration and it succeeds, you can use your reaction to then inspire a different ally at the same time, without using an inspiration dice. You can only use this a number of times equal to your charisma modifier, but it still stretches the uses of your inspiration to an incredible degree. Overall, this is a really great subclass if you're the face of the party, but it is a little limiting, as in it's not going to be as useful in combat. However, if you're doing a lot of role playing and you're doing a slightly less combat heavy campaign, this is absolutely stellar. So I'm very torn between an A and a B for this subclass. If you have any significant amount of combat in your campaign, I would put this more at a B, but if you know what you're getting into and you really want to make use of being the face of the party, you got to give this an A. I'm going to give it a low A, but if you know what to expect, you can really make good use of it. Next up, we have one of the more popular bards, the Lore Bard. And I gotta say, there are some features that seem really great, but it's a trap. So hear me out, because I know this is a very well-loved subclass, but I got reasons why it's not that awesome. First off, it gives you some bonus proficiencies, which seems great because bards are so skill focused, and this would give you 3 more proficiencies in skills, but that doesn't help as much as you would think because you already have Jack of all trades. Having more skills makes that feature less useful, but makes you a little better at those skills. However, the amount that those skills improve is only going to be half as much as your proficiency. So overall, it doesn't help as much as it should. The other feature you get from this subclass right away is cutting words, allowing you to use your bardic inspiration as a reaction against your enemies. They then have to subtract the bardic inspiration roll from an attack roll, a damage roll, or an ability check, which is a fairly basic use of the bardic inspiration, so I can't knock it there. But at 6th level, you get magical secrets, which usually you have to wait till 10th level to get as a bard. This allows you to dive into other classes' spell lists, and you can learn those spells, and in this situation, it doesn't count against the number of spells that you know. Now, this seems really great, but you do get magical secrets from another source at a higher level, and this is only expanding your spell list. You can make good use of what bards already have in their spell list. It's not like you have additional spell casting with more spell slots, you just have a slightly larger variety at your disposal. If you're already able to get creative with your spell casting and you can make good use of the bard's spell list on its own, then this automatically becomes a lot less useful. Additional magical secrets seems great, but it's just not as awesome as it should be. If this also allowed me to add my charisma modifier to any cantrips, or allowed me to cast the magical secret spell for free once per long rest or something, then it would be far better. But as it is right now, it's not as powerful as I think people assume it is. The last feature you get at 14th level is Peerless Skill. So you can add your bardic inspiration to one of your rolls, but only for an ability check, which is also very limiting, and you're already pretty good at a lot of skills, so that's also not that great. Overall, I don't feel like this subclass is as good as people assume it is. So because of that, I'm going to give it a D. It's just not living up to the hype. Now, if you're a bit more of an emo bard, then you're going to like the College of Spirits. This is all themed around like being a gloomy, death-loving bard, or maybe you're just really into seances and tarot cards or something. But overall, it's got some interesting features. Right off the bat, you get Guiding Whispers, which is a great addition to being a bard, because bards are very focused on all of the ability checks, and with Jack of all trades, that goes even further. And Guiding Whispers gives you the cantrip Guidance, which is a cantrip that allows you to add a D4 to any ability check. And having that at your disposal is pretty good. The next feature you get is Spiritual Focus, which at 3rd level is mostly just for flavor. It allows you to use like a skull to cast through if you want to be a bit more Shakespearean or just a little more like goth loving, but you can also use like a deck of tarot cards or a crystal ball or anything else that makes you seem more like you would hold a seance or something. However, this does upgrade at 6th level, because now anytime you cast through that spiritual focus, you can add a D6 to any damage or healing that you're doing, which also makes the cantrip Vicious Mockery suddenly better, because the massive downside of Vicious Mockery is that it doesn't deal a lot of damage. So adding another D6 on top of the D4s that it does is pretty good. Not to mention just generally boosting everything else is also pretty good. But the other feature you get right from the beginning of this subclass is Tales from Beyond. So you can spend one use of your bardic inspiration, and then as an action anytime within that day, you get to use whatever you rolled. So there's this table of spirit tales. So when you roll on that bardic inspiration, you see what kind of tales the spirits tell you about, and you can activate some sort of magical ability based on the influences of what that spirit told you. It actually lasts all day, but then once you use it as an action, it goes away and you have to spend another bardic inspiration to do it again. And the table that you're rolling on has a lot of great options, even though it's more up to chance because it's whatever number you rolled, you just kind of gotta deal with it. But it's got everything from being able to teleport around your allies, or give them more temp HP and more armor class, or boosting up the damage they would do, or dealing damage directly to enemies. And what makes it even cooler is that when you level up in Bard, the size of your bardic inspiration die increases, going all the way up to a D12. And this table goes all the way up to 12 as well. So you know that early on you're going to have the access to certain options, but you can always really look forward to what you have the chance of getting later. It's a lot of fun to anticipate, oh, what am I going to get? And what are the ghosts going to tell me about? And with all of the things you can roll being really good, overall, it's a really solid feature. Then at 6th level, besides the upgrade to your spiritual focus, you get Spirit Session. So you can basically hold a seance with members of your party. And for the amount of people included in that spirit session, you can learn that high of a level of a spell. You only know it for the day, and it has to be a divination or necromancy spell. But the fact that you can change it up every single long rest is pretty cool, and it's kind of like having magical secrets but being more versatile at the same time. And the spell doesn't count them against the number of spells that you know as a bard, and you also get the other feature at this level with being able to boost up the damage or healing by a d6. So overall, the 6th level is suddenly way better than the lore bard was, because it's very similar to magical secrets, but you get other benefits as well, and it's also allowed to be swapped out. The final feature you get is at 14th level called Mystical Connection, allowing you to re-roll on that spirit table thing, and you can take whichever roll you like better, but that's kind of standard for anything where you have to roll on a table like this. So overall, I really love this subclass. It's got some cool themes, it has definitely solid role-playing possibilities, and it has a pretty good selection of abilities. The only downside is that rolling on that table does require bardic inspiration, and you only got so many bardic inspiration die to go around, so that does feel really limiting, but you are still able to boost up your damage and other things, so it's good. It just could be a little bit better if maybe rolling on that table didn't use the bardic inspiration, but instead you can roll it a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. That way you still had your uses of bardic inspiration. Overall, it's a very solid subclass. I really like it. I just wish it wasn't so limited on the resources. So I'm gonna give it a B, but I'm gonna give it a pretty high B. Next up, we gotta talk about basically how to be an evil bard with College of Whispers. This gives total like big bad evil bard vibes. The very first feature is Psychic Blades. So when you hit a creature with a melee attack, you can actually deal some additional damage by spending one of the uses of your bardic inspiration die, which is pretty similar to sneak attack from being a rogue, because the damage lines up almost exactly. You get 2d6 to start. It upgrades to 3d6 at 5th level, 5d6 at 10th level, and 8d6 at 15th level, which is exactly the same as the scaling of the sneak attack, but there's less increases along the way and more just big jumps. However, the big difference here is that a rogue can do it basically every turn. Here, you have to use your bardic inspiration. So it's a nice way to help you in combat, but it is still pretty limited. But if you're not in combat, you can wind up chatting somebody up for a minute and using Words of Terror. It allows you to talk to a creature for a minute, and you can make them absolutely terrified. They have to make a wisdom saving throw, and then you can make them terrified of you or another creature of your choice. That frightened condition lasts for an hour, and this is great for role-playing purposes, but not quite as good in combat because it takes a full minute to make happen. So unless you're doing a full 10 rounds of combat with somebody, this is not going to be that useful. But doing it in a social setting can be pretty cool, because if you make them scared of somebody in your party, or even scared of one of their own allies, that can really help you out in some social situations, but it does feel very nefarious. Then at 6th level, you get a little more evil with Mantle of Whispers. So this allows you to basically capture the soul of somebody that died within 30 feet of you, and then you can take on their persona. It lasts for an hour, and you know a decent amount of information about that creature when you take on their persona. And anybody that tries to figure out whether or not you're really them has to make an insight check versus your deception check. But your deception check, if you know you're going this route, you can have expertise in that. And it also gets an additional +5 on top of all of your other modifiers to that deception. So you shouldn't be failing it very often. You can only capture one shadow with this once per short or long rest, but wearing that shadow is kind of creepy. Then the 14th level feature you get from the subclass is Shadow Lore, making a creature believe that you know their deepest, darkest fears or secrets or whatever. And if they fail on a saving throw, they believe that so much that it lasts 8 hours and you're charming them. And then they have to basically do whatever you say. They can't wind up attacking anybody unless they would already probably do that. But using this to manipulate somebody to give you all of their gold or hand over the keys to the kingdom or whatever, it is a pretty strong ability. So using this properly does feel pretty evil, but it could be awesome in a role-playing scenario. Overall, it's a pretty solid subclass, but it is definitely leaning towards being a very evil bard, because it does feel pretty limiting on being a more evil character. That does knock it down a little bit, because it means that you have to role-play this out and try and make it seem not so evil if you're trying to not play an evil campaign. So overall, the limitations on the role-playing do hurt it a bit, and it's not exceedingly powerful, but it is pretty darn good. So I'm going to give it a pretty high B. Now we got to talk about the last two subclasses at the same time, because they are pretty similar. We have the College of Swords and the College of Valor. Now they're both focused on being more combat oriented. They both give you proficiency with medium armor, which is nice, but a Valor Bard also gets access to shields and all martial weapons, while a Swords Bard just gets access to scimitars. And the only reason they get access to scimitars is because they also get a feature allowing them to basically choose one of two fighting styles. The first one is dueling. So if you want to be a dueling bard, you are going to want to use a rapier anyways, but the other fighting style is 2-weapon fighting, and you needed a light finesse weapon to really make that useful, so that's why they gave them scimitars. This is much more of the idea of like the blade dancer bard, and they focus on this idea even more as a swords bard with Blade Flourish. So you can spend your bardic inspiration die on either defensive flourish, allowing you to boost up the damage of your strike while at the same time boosting up your armor class, adding your bardic inspiration die to both numbers. Or you can do slashing flourish, so you deal extra damage on the strike again, but you can also deal that extra damage to another creature within 5 feet of you. But it's just the extra damage. It's not like you're getting a whole extra attack against them. Or finally, you can do mobile flourish. This one's a little more specific because you can push an enemy 5 feet away, but then you can run to them at the same time, but only running to them. You can actually move an amount equal to your walking speed, but if you're not pushing them off a cliff or something, then you wouldn't really have to move more than 5 feet. The big downside here is that you can only do any flourish once per turn. On the Valor side here, it's a little more straightforward. You get combat inspiration. Unfortunately, it's still targeted at other people and not yourself anymore, but that's okay because it still allows your overall party to do a bit more damage. You can add the bardic inspiration die to the amount of damage another creature would do, or that creature can use the bardic inspiration to increase their own armor class as a reaction. It's useful, but it's kind of boring. It's just very straightforward. Then at 6th level, both of these subclasses get extra attack, which is kind of necessary considering they are much more like martial focused and all about using weapon attacks. Then there's the 14th level feature. The 14th level features do have some decent trade-offs, and they have their own pros and cons, because the Swords Bard gets Master's Flourish. So now you can use a D6 instead of your bardic inspiration die and always use the Blade Flourish on any turn, and it doesn't expend a bardic inspiration die. Now you can still use a bardic inspiration die and get a much larger die to roll, but it's kind of nice to just not have to worry about wasting any bardic inspiration. The College of Valor, on the other hand, gets Battle Magic, allowing you to cast a bard spell as an action, and if you do, then you can automatically do a weapon attack as a bonus action. Now here's the deal with this. I see a bit of a downside to going with a swords bard. So you can either choose to be a dueling bard, which is kind of cool, but you're really limited on the amount of blade flourishes you can do, because they're limited by the amount of bardic inspiration you have until 14th level. And once you get 14th level, you're still going to want to use your bardic inspiration most of the time because it's a much larger die. And if you ever want to use your bardic inspiration for anything else, you're going to have to use your bonus action, meaning that I'm probably less likely to use the 2-weapon fighting because that will use my bonus action every single time I use it. So as far as optimizing it, it's kind of hard to do. And if you're going to use dueling, you don't have access to a shield, and bards don't have a lot of health. They're mostly a caster. They're gonna take more damage. So being in melee is pretty tough to deal with, and not being able to have a shield at the same time really hurts. And that low health pool without ways to mitigate it pretty regularly is just really dangerous for a bard. However, the College of Valor both give shields, and they don't limit you to being a melee bard. You can use a bow if you want, and being a bard while staying out of melee combat, keeping yourself safer, makes it just a better subclass because overall you're just in less danger of going down all the time. Not to mention, magical secrets will allow you to jump into the ranger spell list, getting ranger spells before a ranger can get them. For example, Swift Quiver. A lot of people give it a lot of crap, but if you can get it way earlier than a ranger would, because a ranger has to wait until they get a 5th level spell slot, which doesn't happen until 17th level of ranger, you can get it at 10th level of being a bard, meaning that you can hang out at long range with a longbow and just be firing away, getting 2 attacks with your action and 2 as your bonus action thanks to Swift Quiver. And you can pick up Sharpshooter as a feat, boosting your damage up by 40 damage per turn just because you have Swift Quiver. And that's just focusing on the idea of 1 spell with Swift Quiver. Overall, I like this a lot more just because you have the option of more ranged builds. Being a swords bard is just so limiting as it forces you to be in melee combat, it doesn't give you shields, and overall you're in melee with very low health. And I gotta give a little nod to the fact that a Valor bard also feels like the bards from Final Fantasy XIV, because those are more like archer bards, and I think that's kind of more fun to play with. But overall, I just gotta give Valor a little bit of a leg up just for the versatility that they have and just staying out of danger. So I'm gonna put Swords Bard at a C and put Valor Bard at a B. That covers all of the current Bard subclasses in Dungeons and Dragons. Let me know what you think about these subclasses and if you think I did anything wrong with my tier list. In general, I think there's nothing that's overall garbage, but at the same time, there's nothing that's incredibly amazing, warranting that S tier, but I could be wrong, and I've been swayed before in the comments. If you want access to an optimized version of every single Bard subclass, including all of the spells that I would probably give them, I'll go ahead and post those over on Patreon, linked in the description down below, where you can be just as awesome as some of these people that help support this channel, or the especially awesome player character patrons, the Holy 999s, Christopher Sam, Sparrow Skrull, Zach, Felix Ulick, Dennis Bumgardner, Barrelist, Kevin Shirley, Zephyros, That Funny Man 57, Joshua Maynard, CGC 2014, Elisa Martinez, Panda Milkshake, Ted Z, Andrew Nobles, Carcat Kitsune, Decker Joint, Z13, Daniel Galvin, and the Dino 21. Then there's the Dungeon Master level patrons I actually play D&D with: Silas Uchiha, 696, T Brownie, Julia B. De Oliveira, Just Wolf, Shane Gilroy, Daniel Saffler, Conman ZX, Cybersiety, and Salvador. Then there's the one who goes above and beyond anything I ever expected, GameSteak. He's my god tier level patron, and he contributes way more than I ever expected. So a very special thank you to him. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button. And I'll be here helping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to play as a bard in D&D. And if you really made it all the way to the end of this video, and you actually wanted to see that Easter egg, he's right up here. And to let me know you actually saw the Easter egg, go ahead and put in the comments what you think of him by saying that dude is. If you think he's like a complete moron or something, that's why I said that dude. Otherwise, you're gonna say he's a complete moron, or he's an idiot, or he's annoying, and I'll think you're talking about me, and it might just utterly destroy my soul on the inside. But If you say that dude is, at least I'll have some hope that you are talking about him. But until next time, have fun playing as a charisma build and completely destroying encounters and campaigns by talking your way out of them as a bard in D&D.